Hey everyone, welcome to the first online meetup of the Kubernetes. What's it even called? I can barely remember. It's been so long since we've seen it, everyone. We've prepared a very oh, stream open myself. Forgive me, I'm new to this. It's been quite a while, and we prepared a very interesting panel, I hope. First up, we have, oh God. First up, we have Rain, Taylor, and later on, Alessandro will join us as well to discuss all things KubeCon. And we have a very interesting presentation from a former almost colleague. And later on, we will have a closing panel as well. We are online, but we still have the usual stuff like the code of conduct. You can find it online. Oh, hey,
Taylor, where's your unicorn?
Yeah.
I didn't get the memo. Yeah, I'm actually growing my own horn, but maybe you just don't see it.
Interesting. I thought unicorn suits are the norm now.
They are.
They are.
I did.
Right?
I did have a. There was something on Amazon that I had for this past Halloween last year, when it was safe to be out, and I had a unicorn suit there. So I'm bummed. Yeah, I should have put that on for this one.
You could go put it on now. We can wait.
That's true. That's true.
We can wait. Meanwhile, maybe you want to introduce yourself, Rain.
Or I could introduce myself. Taylor, go get dressed. No, I'm just kidding. Is that okay within the code of conduct? Sorry. So you were saying that there is a code of conduct. Did you want to go into detail, Peter? Because I could also introduce myself.
Well, it's the regular CNCF code of conduct. It's based on the contributor covenant. The link is on the Meetup page. So if you don't know, now you know. Just don't be an asshole, everyone, even online.
Be kind.
Be kind.
So I am Rain Leander, and I work for a company called Packet, which recently became a company, was acquired by Equinix, and there may be things happening very soon. Yeah. And I'm a developer advocate with the new developer relations group with Packet and Equinix company, which is what, that's what it says on LinkedIn and stuff, but it's such a mouthful. I tend to just say I'm with Packet. And it's a bare metal company that kind of focuses on the metal. So we're more interested in supplying hardware rather than if you're a application developer who's looking at AWS or hypervisor, or and you are like, I want to try this directly on bare metal, we rent it out, and that can be just the individual, it can be enterprises, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I've been in open source world for 12 years. I've been in tech for 20. And I've been in DevRel for about 6 years. I've been a unicorn for 44 years.
Awesome. Thank you. And Taylor, maybe you?
Absolutely. So hello, everyone. My name is Taylor Dolezal, and I'm a senior developer advocate at HashiCorp. Previously was working for a big entertainment company that makes movies, and was at that company that I started working with Kubernetes. Really wanted to be a CNCF ambassador, And then it was right around that time that I saw the call for 1.14 release Shadows, and then was really excited about that. Started on the communications team for the Kubernetes releases, and then worked my way up till 1.16, led that release, took off 1.17, and then got called back to duty on Kubernetes 1.18, was release shadow there, and then led 1.19. So it's been a long and fun ride, but absolutely love open source, love Kubernetes, and really excited to talk more about that with y'all today.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, so KubeCon, did you watch some talks? What was anything that stood out for you?
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to say something really quick. I just realized I'm a Kubernetes baby. So I just started playing with containers and CNCF, Kubernetes, all of it. And I'm just absolutely fascinated. But this was my very first. I feel like Taylor and I very easily balance the KubeCon experience because this was my first time ever. There was always another event that was more important to my project during the same time as KubeCon. And yeah, so I was really happy that it went virtual. I loved the idea of always having a virtual element in the future, even when we go back to in-person. And yeah, I think I just want to put that qualifier out there that I'm a Kubernetes baby.
That's fine. I mean, every day it feels like I'm just a newbie again, because everything is just moving so fast, and that's why we're here, right?
True.
Yeah.
There is, I can't remember what book that it was, but it went into detail heavily about that, is that as the future keeps progressing and as things get faster, there's going to just be more and more to learn. You won't be able to keep up, and just will be in that forever state of always noob, in terms of trying to figure things out, which I absolutely agree with. I mean, I still feel that way with some of the Kubernetes things and trying to, synthesize and understand what's going on. I think with KubeCon, so I did go to KubeCon for the first time in San Diego just last year. So I think that before that, I was always really excited to see those talks come out and watch those. But I was really surprised by just the amount of time I spent in the hallway track. I'd heard everyone talk about that and kind of discuss what those experiences were like. And really being there in San Diego, there were several talks that I really wanted to go see, but I ended up spending more time in the hallway track and talking with contributors and talking with notable people in the Kubernetes community and just kind of, strengthening those relationships, talking about how to get involved with different aspects of the project, and just hear about interesting and really cool use cases, and just have, fun conversations, figure out, who are these people behind their contributions? What do they do for fun? Do they like pumpkin pie? Do they like roller coasters? Just kind of talking through those things. It was a lot of fun, but absolutely agree. It's I think with this past KubeCon was sad that experience wasn't able to be had, just kind of meeting and having that community feel. But it was fun to watch some talks, see people in the booths. I was working in the HashiCorp booth and engaging people over Slack. So still got that sense of getting to talk with people and somewhat of a sense of community, but really did miss, not being able to sit down at a table or, talk about different swag choices with different people.
I completely agree. I've attended a lot of virtual events over the past few months, and I don't think anyone has gotten the hallway track aspect quite right. And also I personally haven't gotten the conference experience quite as balanced as I had gotten it in person. I'm an introvert, but I play an extrovert on TV. And so I know what I need to do if I'm going to a conference to speak, if I'm going to run a booth, if I'm going to just hang. Those are all different energy levels. And I have a hotel to go back to. And since I'm at home, I don't have a hotel to go back to. I still have to go be a mom. I still have to be a partner. I still have to extrovert at my house after a conference. And so I've found that I tried to do the hallway track and the Slack channels and the booths and stuff initially, but I found I needed downtime. So I was going to ask you if you participated, like what was the hallway track like for KubeCon EU, and did you participate at all?
Absolutely. I did participate, but I absolutely agree with you. It was a lot more disjointed than it typically is. And, like you said, it's you when you go to that type of event, you kind of leave your home life and work life and those kind of concerns, back at the door, especially if you've left the area that you live. And I definitely felt that too. It's just like, oh, it's time to make lunch. That doesn't really happen at KubeCon. It's where do we go for lunch, which is always a lot more fun than jumping over to your stove and then jumping back into the thread later. But I'd say it was mostly over Slack, and then just I did take it a little bit more asynchronously, the hallway track, see what people were talking about on Twitter. I think that was my preferred way to look at it. I'm very much like you in that I'm very much an introvert, yet play an ambivert on TV. But it's definitely feel that, and it's nice to step away and just kind of have that breathing time, which I did get in this experience, but kind of felt it was hard to kind of get that momentum going in a Slack thread. And then obviously you don't get that kind of emotion conveyance, and you can respond with emojis and whatnot. But I think that's what I found is the best way to express myself when you can't hear somebody's tone of voice. But absolutely agree with that.
All hail the emoji. Yeah. Can you imagine if we were just using basically text editor MUDs effectively and describing everything? I'm so glad we have emojis.
It's impossible.
And I'm so glad we have streams.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Peter.
We were this close to organizing a viewing party here in Holland with a group of people, but then at the last hour, I was very enthusiastic about it myself because things looked sort of under control back then. But then I got some concerned calls from the community members, and I had to rethink. But I also really miss this interaction with the local community. So local community, do say something in the chat to let us know that you're still here.
I
Also, I fortunately did get to watch one of the talks together with a friend here who came over and just but yeah, I'm really sad as well. I've been using Kubernetes since 1.1, and this was gonna be my first KubeCon, believe it or not. Wow. So it sucks. Yeah. So Taylor, you've been running the virtual booth. What was that like?
Honestly, it was really interesting. The first, I think it was the first day, I'd say there was a little bit more engagement because people hadn't really figured out the right means of communication on that front. So we did have a couple of people stop by the booth. I was really excited to run over to my friends' companies' booths and be like, hey person, I'm so excited to be at KubeCon. I hope you're having fun. And leave them little cryptic messages just all over it. But that was kind of fun, Easter egg hunt style. But really liked that. And then once people found out about Slack and kind of using that, they're like, oh yeah, we just use the CNCF Slack. then that boost experience became a little bit easier, and more of those conversations, honestly, all of my personal conversations happened in the Slack context. But
cool. So I tried asking this earlier, but any particular talk that you that really stood out for you? Yes.
There were, I'd say, honestly, it was really a toss-up. I always liked the maintainer tracks and the contributor tracks, and how they focus on, kind of what was learned over that release cycle for a lot of the community, or that specific special interest group, or SIG. And I personally, I really liked the open policy agent talks. There was not one that I did not like. I just find that topic very interesting right now, especially around gatekeeper, and just kind of, how do we enact policy as code? I really think that's fascinating. I do a lot of work in infrastructure, and I don't feel like, HashiCorp has a toolkit called Sentinel that allows you that kind of functionality across enterprise products, but OPA is really good for an open source context. And so that's why I really love it, is because I can use conf test to test out my Terraform and things like that. So I find that really fascinating and a lot of fun. But that's kind of what stole my attention this KubeCon.
Right.
So I have an old fondness for the New Stack and their pancake breakfasts. I used to go to those at OpenStack conferences. So I definitely caught that one and was just completely like, oh, I miss pancakes. And I because I'm new, I kind of kept it I didn't want to overwhelm myself a little bit. So I watched keynotes, and I also watched the I forget who it was, but there were a pair of women who did if this is your first KubeCon talk, and it was full of brilliant things that I was like, this could be taken to every conference. Karen and Michelle Norali, Karen Chu. Oh yes, and she's coming on later, I think. So they did a talk together that was just brilliant. That I was like, you know what? I really wish I had that in March, because not only was it introductory to this is what CNCF is and whatnot, but also it went into the technical oversight committee. It went into, of course, the COC, but then what was it? Just turn off your other applications because they're going to be distracting. Go ahead and take notes instead of treating it like television. And I was like, I wish I had this talk. I knew these things, but in March, April, I want to say it was until end of May, beginning of June, before I was like, I'm not getting enough out of these conferences. Maybe, and their talk was everything I have learned. It was brilliant. And then with the pancake breakfast, I appreciated 4 particular things. They were talking about their new book, which is the state of Kubernetes or something like that. And they were talking about how training and storage has gotten way, way better with Kubernetes, but culture and security needs a lot more attention. And I was like, that explains why. I used to hear that Kubernetes was very difficult to ingest. Yes, exactly. So Taylor totally just put the link in the, yes. So if that could go over on the comments side. Yeah. And I used to think that Kubernetes storage was really difficult. Actually, I used to not know anything, but I heard that Rook was pretty much it for Kubernetes. And it's gotten even better, but also you have options. And with training, there are 2 certifications now. And this is brilliant. I'm sad that culture still needs some love, but you know, I'm here now. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, like, and security, I think it's brilliant that what is it? DevSecOps is now a thing. Is the new DevOps?
It's like biz, dev, sec, ops, fin. What?
Wow. Damn.
People, the marketing people keep expanding it.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Are we going to max out at 3 terms, or is it going to go higher than that? That's, you know, over under. What do you think?
Yeah, there is no limit.
Over.
Yeah. No, but Priyanka even specifically mentioned DevSecOps in her keynote, and I was like, yay, that will help with the security getting actual attention and actually thinking about Kubernetes as you're developing. It's about time. Yeah.
Yeah. Another theme that really stood out for me, it's been growing towards this, is edge computing. Is also a pretty big. Yeah, I figured you wanted to say something about that, Rain. No?
Yeah, exactly. I'm over the moon for not WebEdge, KubeEdge. And as a matter of fact, tomorrow morning, Central European time. So I don't know where, I know we're in Central European time, but if we have people from outside of Central European time, sorry. But yeah, I'm totally going to dive into KubeEdge because I just went to the, so OpenStack has an Edge working group that meets on Mondays. And literally one of the founders or like somebody came on and they were like, this is what we're doing. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I have to play with it. So yeah, I'm going to play with it tomorrow morning and figure out what it's all about and how it is to contribute and stuff like that. And it just graduated, didn't it? From sandbox to incubation.
Cool.
So that's cool.
Yeah, this is really a very interesting trend to me, because at the same time that you see everyone moving into public cloud, there's also this counter movement where people still want to be able to hack their servers or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really interesting, and but it makes complete sense to use Kubernetes for that, right? I mean, it's almost like it's built for it.
I like the constant cycles of client server that we keep bouncing back and forth to. You know, we had mainframes and terminals, and then we went to personal, desktop computers, and we went back to the cloud, and back to the edge.
Yeah.
And then someone that was being funny that I used to work with said that they dealt with a lot of on-prem stuff, being at the entertainment company that I was before. And they said, oh, do you want to make your job sound cool again? Just say it's edge computing. I thought that was really funny. I was like, that's not, okay, it's kind of true.
It is. It is. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely where we're going. That's one of Packet's passions, is doing edge work. And open source work as well as bare metal work. Yeah. Yeah,
but both Packet and HashiCorp announced a bunch of products around this, right? Do you want to tell us something about that, Taylor?
Yeah, so I don't know if there was any big announcements that we had from HashiCorp during KubeCon, other than just kind of calling out, hey, you can use Terraform to manage Kubernetes, and you can use CRDs with the Terraform Alpha provider and some things of that nature. I had a lot of fun. I did a deep dive session that week and kind of talked about how to set up a Kubernetes cluster and Helm charts and just kind of how you could manage those things. The thing that I've seen a lot of working with Terraform and talking with practitioners is that they'll use tools like Terraform to spin up infrastructure, and then that's kind of it. And they don't really realize that you can manage your GitHub repository permissions and set your branch policies and spin up Helm charts and clusters. And, there's so many things that you can do, and you don't have to, it's not just your init process, right? And then you just use kube control and manually define these things out. You don't follow GitOps at all. You can. And so I think that was, that's kind of mostly what I had talked about with people that week. And that kind of was the focus, being that those things had come out weeks prior. And so nothing too big, but yeah, I think there's going to be some pretty fun announcements coming out later this year around projects coming out of HashiCorp.
Cool.
Yeah, exactly. So like we didn't make any announcements around there, and as a matter of fact, we've kind of not been very active in the events lately. Because of the acquisition and whatnot. We do have announcements coming out, but I don't know what I'm allowed to say. And so I'm going to play this. I'm going to take this safe route and say that soon some exciting things are happening. I can tell you from a personal point of view, I've been working on our standards project, which is basically taking all of the Packet Host and Packet Labs repositories and bringing them up to the same standards, which it kind of like if you're an engineer within the company and you want to just play, or you're experimenting, or you're working on something specific, you just boot up a repository and you play with it. And over the years, that means that some of those repositories become products and some don't, and some become education and blah, blah, blah. And when you have so much chaos and no standardization, it means that some of the open source projects you have out there don't have licenses or testing or getting started guides. So that's what I've been working on is getting we have two different levels of repos, and we have our experimental, which is please don't use it on production. We'll do a best effort support, but
and people will do that anyway,
yeah,
right?
Oh, totally. And you know what? I encourage the innovators. I am not good for your production. I will encourage you to make mistakes and break things. But please don't listen to me when it comes to your production and your user data, please. And then there's the maintained repositories. And so there's different levels, like everything needs to have a license. Everything needs to be documented. Everything needs to have testing. Yes. But after that, there's just a couple of extra things that I think are important. And that's what I've been working on. Yeah. So maybe check back with us in about, like 2 to 4 weeks.
I'm sure we will hear about it on your Twitter feed.
Yes.
Yes. All right. There's a question from the audience. That's cool.
What is Packet's story around ARM? Are they still actively pushing it forward? Yes, definitely. We actually, it's called Works on ARM is the project, and we just we officially renewed that contract, I want to say like a month ago, very, very recently, for another year. So definitely. Actually, that was one of the things that I heard about the Cube Edge project is they specifically go, yeah, and we're making sure it works on ARM as well as x86. And I was like, oh, I gotta check this out. So yes, definitely ARM is here to stay.
Very cool. Yeah.
Hopefully that doesn't cost you an arm and a leg. Am I right? Hopefully not.
You actually went there.
It's like, all right, I'll see you later. I'll see myself out.
Taylor, you did mention the different talks that you went into, and especially the SIGs, but you didn't go much in depth about it. Can you tell us a bit more about these SIGs that you are so into?
Absolutely. So there are two that, well, three that I really get involved with. So SIG, for those of you that don't know, stands for Special Interest Group. So, so I am a big part of SIG release. That was, that's the group that manages the actual Kubernetes release and just kind of all of the tooling set up around that. Things like release notes, CI signal, the build jobs, the images, and that build process. So all of that machinery, all those mechanics are kind of set up and managed via that special interest group, and just really a fun group of people. I think the thing I can't understate is that when you go to a 9-to-5 job, you're there with people that kind of share that, mostly share that same goal with you. You're there to get paid, right? You need to eat, you need to be able to drive, you need to be able to do things like that. When it comes to open source, people are there because of the project. And so while they, have jobs or other things that they're concerned about, family life and other things outside of that project, they're bringing all of that passion with them to the project. So that's a really fun thing to see. And that completely changes the dynamic. And so that's what I really love about working with people in that space. I also work with the special interest group documentation group, the SIG Docs group. I find that a lot of fun because they manage the website, and having an SRE background, that's something I find a lot of fun and fascinating, making sure the Kubernetes blog and other documentation is up for people there. And then SIG Contribex, which I think is one of the much cooler SIGs in terms of, have you heard of people really focused on contributor experience? Like that's incredible. That's really incredible. Like it's so cool. And just kind of that group is so great with educating the next set of Kubernetes, taking the Kubernetes end users or people passionate about the project and teaching them, how do I help? Like that is the group that is the best at answering that question and just really helping in terms of mentoring and, fostering that next group of Kubernetes people and contributors. So those are the three that I'm involved with. And each of them is so fundamentally different, but so good. I really like working with all the different groups of people, and you do see some crossover between those groups too, which is always fun to see.
Yeah.
When do they meet? When do these three SIGs meet?
So that's a great question, honestly. So there are different meetings throughout the week. There are different sub-projects within a SIG. So you might have like Monday mornings right now is the Kubernetes 1.20 release team meeting. And so right now they're just on a one meeting a week cadence. That'll increase to 3 meetings a week and then 5 closer to the end of the release. So it is a lot to balance on your calendar, depending on what you want to get into. So SIG Docs is typically on Tuesdays. The blog sub-project meets on Thursdays. One of the marketing group, the like open source marketing group, they're obviously not trying to sell you anything, just talk about Kubernetes and the cool things the community is doing. But again, also an incredible context that you don't normally see is in open source, a marketing team, with no sales. So it's just the goal, just like come check out the project, learn about these things and these people and what they're doing. So that's typically what they're focused on. That's early in the morning, my time on Friday. So there's just about at least one Kubernetes meeting every day during the week with the groups that I'm in. I'm not able to make it to all of them, but try to hit as many as possible. But yeah, depending on what you're looking for, those are spread out across the week pretty quite well.
Is there a centralized place maybe on the Kubernetes website or something that has like all of the SIGs and their meeting times and stuff?
I know that there's a community calendar on that front. Mm-hmm. And so that's where like a lot of the more global types of events will be listed. So like the Kubernetes community meeting, that will span all of the special interest groups. So that is captured in one place. I don't believe all the SIGs, like otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see through to the bottom of that calendar.
Yeah.
Each of those are broken up via the Google Groups. And so as you join a Google Groups, for the Google group for that special interest group, you're then most usually added to those calendar events. And then you can see based on that. I think that if anyone out there wants to get involved in a SIG if you're already thinking like, maybe I could, definitely check it out. You don't have to, sign your name on any dotted lines. You can come in and kind of lurk, sit in the background, see if this sounds right to you, something you want to get involved in. And then my advice is just be deliberate in that choice too. If you really want to learn more about API machinery, check out that SIG. If you like documentation and websites, check out that SIG. Don't oversubscribe is my advice. I did that and it was not pretty. You don't get more time. You only have what you have. So be mindful of that. But that's absolutely recommend checking out a SIG if that sounds like something that you'd want to do or look into.
Definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You can very easily Taylor,
hey,
go get dressed. You need a onesie.
Hey.
Everybody wearing a onesie.
It's a onesie party, yeah.
Yeah, so I work with the Galactic Empire, as you can see. It's a little bit more corporate, yeah.
How are you doing, Alessandro?
Very good. It's a bit warm in here now, but yeah.
Yes, these onesies are definitely not like it's September, but. Hey, maybe Alessandro, you want to introduce yourself for the audience.
Oh, yes. So yes, I'm Alessandro. I co-run the Dutch Kubernetes Meetup, which is an honor because it's been a wild ride. We have more than 2,500 people, so that's pretty cool. Because of that, I'm also a CNCF ambassador. So our good friends at CNCF made me an ambassador 2 years ago. And then out of that experience, last year we organized the first in the world Kubernetes Community Day Amsterdam. Peter was there, Flor was there. We had so much fun. And this year we had to, of course, postpone it just a little bit. So that's what I do. In my spare time, I'm a Microsoft software engineer at Microsoft. So that's what I do. That's a lot of spare time, of course.
Cool. So we've been discussing. We've been discussing announcements that stood out to us. Talked a little bit about Edge and about the whole SIG framework, and that's where you joined. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to discuss on this?
I'm just, I can discuss the community side of things. So I'm mostly involved with the community side of things at the CNCF and Kubernetes project. So I'm not a coder, so that's why maybe I'm not part of any SIG, but I support the community side. This is what I thought when I started actually years ago doing the DevOps community. Like I told myself, like, I'm not really good at coding, right? So really not my thing, or I can try, but it's not the only way to contribute. To be a Kubernetes contributor, you can be without writing a single line of code. You can write documentation, you can look through the bugs, you can organize a meetup. That's what I do. And it's all good ways to contribute. It's not just, it's not a developer community where people are just down on their keyboard, just thinking code. It's a community of people in the first place, and there's so much more to people than the code they make. It's also the way they communicate. It creates a whole culture, a whole let's say sub world of interesting people.
Yeah, one of the first Kubernetes classes I took was, I forget who, maybe it was by VMware. Anyway, they specifically said CNCF actually is about containers, microservices, CI/CD, and DevOps. And I was like, I like that. No, this is an old class.
Yeah.
But I appreciated that it wasn't just about the technology. It was also about the culture around the technology. I know it's like super hot, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of warm here in the Netherlands today. So, but yeah, I appreciate that balance. It's not just a bunch of people coding. Not that I don't love coders. It's also documentation. It's also culture. It's also security. It's also and one thing that I really appreciated in the keynote was the specific shout outs, like almost constant shout outs to the doers, to the users, and to people other than kind of the default. Like you think FOSS and you think, oh, I can never do free open source software contributions because I'm not a coder. Well, actually, there's a lot to FOSS beyond the code. So I appreciate, especially meetup organizers. Yes.
There is one working group that I suggest everybody to check out is the mental health or mental well-being working group. 2 years ago in Barcelona, I found this booth, and there were people that I knew there. And it's actually an initiative together with other organizations from the Cloud Native Computing Foundation to help people get through hard times. And this is of course, this is all the more useful now and all more relevant now. So, I thought to myself, like, hey, so finally somebody that can voice what I always thought, that this job is hard and going through hard times is hard, and we can help each other going through hard times. So how cool is that? There is finally an organization that speaks up about these issues. So CNCF is kind of organization.
Absolutely. I think, I've been in the open source communities from a very young age, and like Rain mentioned that the culture in the Kubernetes community is maybe not up to par yet, but I think it's actually the most inclusive open source community that I've ever participated in. So we're not there yet, maybe, but I've always thought that we generally do these things pretty well, and I think it's also fairly nice to see everyone, being honest about, what they're going through. You see that a lot, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Shout out to burnoutindex.com, by the way. I thought it was a really good website to keep tabs on your own mental well-being.
I mean, make no mistakes. I mean, the Cloud Native Foundation, it's a software powerhouse, right? So they churn out software like at insane speed, and now we have 12 graduated projects, and more are coming in, and the more it's becoming a thing. Like, you make an open source project, it's an aspiration to be part of the Cloud Native Foundation. So it's kind of the cornerstone where all other projects now are being measured, right? So it all happening in a very short span of 4 years, about a bit more. So it's kind of impressive, right? It's kind of accelerating. Linux took 25 years to arrive at this point, and this Cloud Native thing is just shooting through in 4 years. So we'll see where we're going. It's a very interesting time to be alive. Sure.
Can I do some? Oh, no,
go ahead. Well, I was going to say, so when the kernel came out, when the Linux kernel came out, I should say, like there was no World Wide Web. There was, there was email. There was a couple of what were they called? Chat boards. That's not the name of them. But now the was it IRC wasn't around then?
There was Gopher and Usenet.
Gopher, Usenet. Thank you. Yes, and now there's Twitch TV and TikTok and any other way you want to communicate. And to me, like any new technology that's coming out every year has an advantage by default over the software that came out last year, because it's got so many more opportunities to spread the word, to communicate, to get going. And open source has taken over the world. So words. Epic statement to tie that up. Yeah, to me, yes, it's exploded. But part of it is its youth that it's exploded, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, and this is, I think, a nice bridge for something I was just about to say earlier. You see a lot of people, semi-joking about the complexity of this entire ecosystem, and making jokes about the CNCF landscape. That I think we've all seen the meme, right? Or one of the many memes.
Which one?
Yeah. Where do you think this is going, and how do we curtail this massively growing in complexity and maybe even there's a word for this, like a choice overload, because there's so many options, so many different things, and it's open source. You have to assemble things yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
This is not a question that anyone is about to answer, right? But
it's really difficult. I agree. It's because there's so many different. Kubernetes is huge and it supports so many different workloads, and so you can infinitely combine that. It's like saying what's the best outfit to wear? Like you could pick a billion shirts. You could do your hair a billion different colors. There's so many different ways that and permutations that you can create. So granted, Kubernetes is a little bit more formal with running workloads, but in terms of that, I think that it's going to be a little bit of kind of let's see what sticks. At first, it's going to be again another comparison. When you see a bunch of cake sitting on the counter, you're going to run and you're going to eat as much as you can. Then you're going to get a little bit sick of it after a while, and then you won't eat so much. I think that's kind of what we're going to see happen with these projects. Is that a lot of them will come in, we'll see which ones work, and then we'll kind of take what we need from those projects. Like even OPA, you see that kind of like with the pod security policy, we can use that project in that context. We saw core DNS, come in and kind of replace that functionality that had been there in Kubernetes before. So as those, as the projects the community really uses are embedded more into the project, my hope is that gets easier to use. But I agree, right now, if you wanted to kind of like tweak every single configuration and turn every knob within Kubernetes, that's gonna be more than a full-time job.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
You easily get overwhelmed.
Yeah, I've been onboarding 2 new clients with on-prem setups, and it's been a tough cookie. And basically all that I'm doing is curtailing all of this complexity and just cutting away options. And that's weird, right?
Yeah. Do we want to answer Daniel Paulus?
Oh, right. Yes. Is anyone participating in October?
In October. Yeah, definitely. And also, so we at Packet have been doing, the developer relations group has been doing internal hacks every Friday, where we try to explore some aspect of either the portal, the API, et cetera, et cetera. And we would like to open that up to everybody. And we're trying to figure out the logistics. So we won't formally be registered with DigitalOcean, but we are definitely going to have a week of something. But then from a personal note, of course, I'm going to go to DigitalOcean and look at the website and see what's going on. And also a friend of mine just announced that Camunda, which is a decision platform, is opened up, and I read their qualification and I was like, I could do that. It's basically 2 pull requests and you get their rewards. I love Hacktoberfest. And I try to dress up for them and like document and be like, don't you want to do this too? Yeah. October is my favorite month.
It's going to be fun. I absolutely plan to participate in Hacktober as well. Have also talked with some coworkers about different places within our documentation that just aren't really clear. And then even like looking at, I support Terraform mostly. And so we've seen a couple places where, it makes sense, like, hey, this function looks a lot like this one. Can we combine them? Or like, why are these different? And kind of like, let's do a lot better job there. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. And then obviously, within the Kubernetes space, going to be taking a look at some items there. And then we just in SigDocs recently started up a like website performance sub-project. So we're going to, try to bring those page load times down a little bit. So that'll be fun to look into as well during the month of October.
What about you, Alessandro?
Oh no! Every month is acting.
Oktoberfest.
But at GitHub they also do kind of sprints or competition. I don't like competition, so I'm okay with just coding whatever I feel like. I'm not per se a fan of hackathons in general. I feel too much pressure. I work better when I'm relaxed. So, but it's my year. I understand that there are documentation sprints in Kubernetes as well. So that's it's a thing. So, but yeah, that's not my thing.
I definitely, when it comes to competitions or like those weekend hackathons, I definitely like go in enthusiastic. I am a competitor. But then I also give myself permission to completely fail, to drop out, to leave, to just do what I can. And I find that's the pressure valve that I need to actually attend. Because if I could very easily just skip things all the time to being overwhelmed, being stressed, or competitive nature.
Giving yourself permission to fail, I think, is an essential skill when working with software. I have the same feeling lately as well. And as for me, I think I will have to hack a little bit on the vSphere CSI driver, because that's been bugging me to no end for the last month. And maybe write some docs, or at least make a lot of contributions there, because that really needs a lot more love than it's currently getting.
Yeah.
It's funny, we live so much in the cloud, and sometimes we forget there are actually a lot of vSphere servers in somewhere. Yes. Somebody but I didn't even know there was a thing like a vSphere CSI driver. Okay, that's cool. I learned something new.
Absolutely. I sometimes feel like I'm okay. Yeah, I feel like I'm the only user.
Most definitely not. Most definitely
no.
It's probably coming from, but the people using it, maybe they don't have that kind of culture that immediately when you find a bug, what is the first thing you do? You go to GitHub and file an issue, right? That's actually, sometimes I'm happy I found a bug because, oh wow, I can finally find an issue. And in that world, it's not like that. So maybe we should help them getting more open about defects in the software, which is not a big deal at all. It's a way to improve it, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a good opportunity there.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're nearing the end of this panel. Thank you all so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
And yeah, it's been really great meeting you. Well, live on stream. Yeah.
Thank you, Taylor.
Yeah, just pop the collar.
Are there? Does anyone have some parting words?
Well,
oh, if you're new, don't over subscribe to mailing lists.
Yes.
I've already learned a lot, so I would highly recommend joining the Dutch Kubernetes Meetup.
So yes, so me, Peter, Floor, we try to keep this thing alive. It was hard the last few months. We didn't do much, so but summer is over. We're just gonna stay home, so we might as well. So find us on Slack, on the Kubernetes Slack, on NL-users channel, and can propose stuff. I mean, we just poor people. We don't have many ideas, so we rely on the community to get more ideas and contributions. So please join, and maybe one day we'll meet again in person. One can hope.
Definitely. Oh, and also stay on for the rest of the meetup. Definitely.
Obviously. In a few minutes, we have Thatcher Peskins joining us. He's going to tell us about green compute, which is one of these very interesting edge cases where Kubernetes fits in. So again, thank you all so much for joining and for your time. And I hope we can do this again sometime. All right, we will have a very short break, and at 7 sharp, we will have the talk from Thatcher. So please stay on, and we'll see you in a bit. Welcome back, everyone. Next up is Thatcher Peskins from Leaf Cloud. Is it? It's now.
That's
hey,
correct.
Thatcher.
Hi.
Hey. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm great.
Good to see you again.
Let's dress up again. Yeah, Thatcher and I actually know each other from a company we both worked at, and unfortunately, I don't work there anymore. But I'm super excited for what Thatcher is going to tell us about the continuation of this project. So, Thatcher, are you all set to go?
Yeah, I'm ready when you are.
All right. You can kick off.
So first of all, let me say thank you for inviting me, Peter. I think it's really nice. Also, it's the whole effort of the Cloud Native Kubernetes Meetup in Netherlands. It's big kudos for that. Also, Alejandro and Floor, thank you for putting this up and and organizing this, getting all the people together. I think it's really awesome what you're doing, and I really want to establish that. Also, big kudos for having the big animal outfits. I think really add something extra. So that's great. Really nice to see. My slides will be coming. Let me do a very short introduction of myself. I'm Thatcher. I've been in the cloud space for a while. Started my own company in Delft years back. Worked for Docker for a couple of years, right when it was starting, when it was .cloud still. And ever since, I've been dreaming of what can you do for new stuff in the cloud. I then joined the company. That's also how I know Peter, they just mentioned. And long story short, we now rebranded and restarted this company as Leaf Cloud. But I'll tell you much more about that later on. For now, I'd like to start with a statement. And so I'll share my screen for that. Yes. Please let me know if you can see it as well. Great, perfect. So really, Peter asked me to talk about something, not necessarily about the company that I work for, but talk about something that I've seen at the Kubernetes conference, where I was, privileged to be attending. I saw a couple of shows, and Peter points me out to this one particular presentation that was about how to love Kubernetes and not wreck the planet. So that's also the title of this talk. And the short summary is that, in the Netherlands, more than 3% of all electricity is consumed by data centers. And this is huge. In fact, what you see is that if you look at the world, and in the Netherlands in particular, you see that there's these big buildings using up so much power, big buildings full of servers and power used for internet. And they blow all this energy as heat into the air. Now, this picture is kind of a pretty one. It's it's the data center of Google in Eemshaven in the north of the Netherlands. But if you look on the left there, you see all these blue things there. Those are the cooling towers. They are there to cool this whole system down. They, by the way, not only use energy, they also use a shit ton of clean water, but that's on another note. The issue is that this 3%, it's a lot. And we need to get rid of the use of fossil fuels globally in order to prevent kind of things that you see going on in California, where the forests are burning, in the Netherlands, where you have these weird late hot summers, Australia's wildfires, and these are really connected to the climate change. And the signs are getting more and more obvious that it's really something we need to do about. Now, in this talk, I want to do essentially two things. I want to talk about what you could do today to reduce your footprint of your Kubernetes and servers and clusters, and what we can do later. I found this little image a while ago. It was actually for a Global Earth Day. It's by Docker, where I worked before. And it had this really nice illustration that I think is very good to use to explain what you can do to essentially save the planet and yet love Kubernetes, right? And what we call the 3 corners of energy are these, and they're also for products. But first thing you want to do is you want to reduce. Just use less. This is by far the easiest way to prevent pollution. The second way to do things is to reuse. Reuse the energy, in our case, for example, for heating. And the third is recycling of heat, for example. And I'll get into more of these things later on. The third one, actually, the recycling is to, for example, if you have high heat, then you can use some kind of heat pump to up the energy and again use it usefully. And so in this presentation, I actually want to do 2 parts. The first part where I'm going to talk about reducing your footprint. And this is really for all the people here in the audience, if you're a DevOps, if you are someone who is building cloud, if you're someone who manages servers or Kubernetes or any of these are some tools you can use to work on. And then in the second part, actually, I'll talk about the reuse of energy, which is something that we do at Leaf Cloud. And then I'll also talk about some of the architectural stuff. So without further ado, this is Holly Cummins. She did a presentation at KubeCon, and I took some of her slides, including her, just to drive a few points home. She says that at IBM, she actually investigated, and that's per account, they have something like 21 clusters running, which is a stellar number because you would expect maybe 1 or 2 clusters per customer, right? And since lots of customers probably don't do anything with Kubernetes at all, this basically shows that there is something of kube sprawl going on. People use a lot of clusters per account, and apparently for a lot of different things, which we know, but there's something here to be done. So obvious thing is, okay, well, use less clusters because every cluster has its own overhead and so forth. Now, how can you do that? One of the hints here, or one of the tips, is to say, okay, you can make 1 cluster per environment, right? So like a dev, staging, pre-production, production, and then these would be 4 clusters, each having essentially a mirror, including all the monitoring, logging, and everything that you have. And then, well, you have a lot of clusters. One of the things we can all do is, well, use the tools that we get with namespaces and other tooling that we have to say, well, let's actually separate maybe prod still, because that's, well, it's safe. We want to run prod as we want to touch as little as possible and have it reliable, but use the other things together, put them on the cluster, and think about it. And the other thing is, and this is a number that she also gave, it comes out of research out of 2017, that shows that something like 25% of the 16,000 servers that they investigated did no useful work at all. Basically, what happens a lot, consciously, subconsciously, that there are some server, some service, and I'm sure you know one as well, where, yeah, I spun it up and I was like, I'm going to use it later at some point, and then you forget about it. And like a month later, you go, shit, it ran, it didn't do anything. So, well, turn them off. And there are some good tools for this, auto-scaling. For example, use that, use tagging, make labels, follow up on this. This is something really a big issue where you can reduce your footprint. And then this is the topic where I want to stay on a little bit longer, which is GitOps, right? It's something that we all love and do and use, but not always to the full extent. Basically, as we go on, we can think about our clusters and our entire infrastructure more and more as a infrastructure as code. Now, infrastructure as code, as we all know, it has this benefit of like you can make a declarative setup where you explain in code, okay, so this is how I want my cluster to look. But the benefit of doing it for the environment is that you can then also spin down your cluster without having to worry too much. Oh, maybe if I need it again tomorrow, then what do I do? Because as you have all defined your repositories in code, you simply spin down your cluster, kill it, and then when you need it again, you just restart it. And this is one of the tools that we need to all start doing, because it will all make us much more relaxed about killing things. And killing things is really one of the best ways to reduce our impact. Now, I have a few other things to reduce. First of all, just increase utilization, right? This is particularly important for the kind of overhead that Kubernetes itself gives, right? Because we often see that we have like 3 control plane nodes, etcd nodes, and so forth, and then we have an n number of workers. The more work we put in a single cluster, the less that this overhead starts to matter, right? So that helps. Also on the single server, like utilize it fully. Because on the server, as you might know, like the CPU might be a big proportion of the energy that the server uses, but the memory, the networking, the motherboard, and the other components of the server also use energy when it is at the base load. And while the cloud providers offer something like multi-tenancy on a particular server, and this way the overall utilization goes up, they sell you like a vCPU, and they will reserve capacity for you. So they will rarely go up to the high utilization. They will always reserve more capacity for you so you can scale. But as you increase your own utilization, the utilization on the server, on the host that you use, also goes up. And then the portion of waste goes down. So really try to do that. It helps for the environment and obviously also for your wallet. So your boss will like it too. Schedule with jobs is also one of the things that that helps increase this utilization. Right, so use jobs in Kubernetes, for example, instead of just deployments, if you can and where you can. It's a powerful unit in Kubernetes. And then also don't be afraid to actually like put the maximum capacity a little bit less than the amount of jobs that you schedule, because this means that as capacity becomes available, it will be filled up. So instead of rather than that you scale your cluster to the maximum size, so you can do everything in 5 minutes, just be all right with it that it takes 20 minutes, but you have a higher utilization. Use burstable instance types. This is one of the other ways to do this. AWS and Azure, they provide you these kind of instance types where you can burst up to some amount of time. This allows these cloud providers to offer you a better price, but on the background, they will also make it so that you can kind of like time share this machine, and it also gets higher utilization. Things like lambdas, like with Knative or AWS Lambda, these kind of things, they help. I will put a question mark here also because at least up until Fargate, while it seemed like they were always already doing this, they were actually just keeping a full instance for you on standby, waiting for you to schedule some kind of job, and like it was not nearly as energy efficient as you might expect. And so I want to close then this topic with basically a question to tool builders, the Kubernetes community as a whole, and basically again like repeat Holly's question here, for tool creators to support tools for better utilization, for elasticity, auto-scaling, multi-tenancy. One of the projects that I'm also still particularly excited about is Kata containers, which allows you to do multi-tenancy for insecure workloads, because then you can actually run your pod in a VM on a host, which allows you to do, use the Kubernetes multi-tenancy without having to worry about like 0-day container escape vulnerabilities. If you have questions about this, I think it's a very interesting topic. Please ask me about it, because we've done a bunch of research in prior times, and as of more recently, a lot of new things are coming available, and I think that this is something that will really help reduce Kubernetes or cluster sprawl, if you will. The de-zombification is also like a topic that we actually are planning to also maybe do some work on, by making it at least visible if there is a zombie server. Like why not make it so that we can actually track the networking on a particular pod, and if it hasn't done any network traffic in a month, assume it's not doing anything and kill it, remove it, done, disposable. Okay, so I really hope that these are already some tools that you can use to think ahead. Okay, what can I do to make my waste smaller, if you will? So then in the second part of this talk, I want to talk about the company in which I'm now co-founder, and it also is a complicated, or it's an interesting topic, if you will. I'm just going to look at the chat. If maybe anyone has any questions about the first part that are burning, Peter or Floor. Otherwise, I'm just going to continue with part 2.
I haven't seen any questions yet, but let's keep it for the end. I think that's better as well.
That sounds great. Thank you. So Leaf Cloud, we are all up for that reuse. So we basically say it's just cloud, but then it's green, way more sustainable. So what we offer is just cloud, servers, storage, networking, and it sounds obvious, but to set us aside from like the typical hosting providers where you order a server for a month and then just get access to the hardware, we really offer cloud. We are based on OpenStack, and so there's also like drivers available for Terraform, Rancher, and the other favorite tools to work with it. Because it has an API and is scalable up and down by the hour. On our nearby roadmap, we have Kubernetes, object storage, and load balancers. These are things that we feel are really important. We don't have them available today, and we have customers using Kubernetes, using Terraform templates successfully, and Rancher. And so it's really possible, but we also want to support it in a native way, cloud native way, and also with auto-scaling, which also ties back to the previous thing where we, of course, would say, use it. These are tools that we help you, like elasticity. So Leaf Cloud, okay, so you're a cloud provider, but you say that you're also greener, you're making some claims. I'm going to come back more on what we exactly claim in a bit. But first, how does our business work? Right here on the left, you see the use of cloud services. So we essentially rent to people like you these servers by the hour or per month, whatever, and you make monthly payments to us. On the right side of this diagram, we offer free heating to locations such as apartment buildings, hotels, and other big buildings where we know that we can use the heat of our servers throughout the year. So really what we do is we do water cooling liquid cooling on our servers, and we capture up to 85% of that and offer it to a building to be reused for substituting fossil fuels for things like taking a shower. So what difference does it make? So this is a bit of a technical detail here, and I'll go through it. On the left here, you see a bar chart for a typical cloud data center. You see the dark gray piece that says energy spent for servers. This is, say, 100 watts for a server. Normally, they're like 200, 300, 400 watts a piece. Let's say that. And on top of that, in a normal data center, up to 50% is used for cooling these servers down. Right? In the first slide, I showed that the Google data center was the blue towers. Now Google is very efficient. Azure is also working on it. So what they have been working on for years and years is to make this red part smaller. Right? So they try to spend less and less energy for cooling, and they've brought it down to say 15% extra, 15% on top of the energy that the servers themselves use. But on the right side, we have Leaf Cloud, to which I'm comparing this. And we say, okay, so of 100% of the energy that our servers use, we can reuse 85%. Basically, we do liquid cooling. All the components that get really hot, we use liquid cooling for that, and we deliver that heat straight to basically boilers from which the hot tap water is pooled in the house, in the building where it's used. And so this immediately replaces or substitutes fossil fuel. Now, some of you might have heard about the PUE metric, the power usage effectiveness. It's a commonly used term in data center business for describing how effective your cooling is. I've used a term here, ERE. It's a number coined and published by the same organization as coined the PUE number. And you see on the bottom right here, the energy reuse effectiveness is basically the cooling plus the power plus the lighting plus the IT reuse divided by the IT use. And so if you compare, if we reuse 85% and use 15%, our ERE comes to 0.15, and for conventional data center to 1.5. So this makes us up to 10% more energy efficient for the same service, which is huge. And we really believe that we should really do something about the environment, and therefore encourage everyone to also look at alternatives where you can for the workloads that you can. So then the question is, okay, so wait, hang on. If you have, if you want to reuse this heat in an apartment building, how do you do it? So this is essentially our distributed data center. Here in the center, you see Leaf Cloud Amsterdam 1. This is our data center. We've chosen a best-in-class green energy data center, which is still, we say, wasteful, of course. But what we do is we only put our storage clusters there. Then on all the Leaf sites that you see around is where we produce most of the heat. And this is normal. Like in most servers, most of the energy goes up on the CPU and the GPU, also some on memory and networking and so forth. The disks typically are a relatively cold business. They don't really produce so much energy, especially if you're talking about SSDs. And so we have a unique architecture where we say our cloud is distributed. And this is possible. Since we're based in Amsterdam, there's actually so much potential for using energy, and the density of the glass fiber networks is so huge that we can actually distribute this to distances that are still small. And so let me show this here as well. What we do is we actually have a disaggregated storage in a given region. So all the SSDs are in the data center, in the core, and between the core and our Leaf sites, we have glass fiber, and we call it dark fiber. We lease this from a company who has this in the ground, and we literally hold both ends of this cable, right? So like typically what you do is or like what you think about it is that if you would have a flashlight and you show in you light in one side, and if you look in another side, you'll see the light come out. So we have network equipment, we light up both sides, and this means that we get to control the speeds that run over this. 2 times 10 gigabit Ethernet, 40 gigabit, 100 gigabit Ethernet, in the future 200, 1000. Like basically the amount of bandwidth that you get off one of these fibers is tremendous. And because we are in this region of Amsterdam that is so unique, that the fiber density is so high, and the amount of regions, the amount of locations that need heat so big, that we pick sites that are less than 10 kilometers away from our core data center. And this in turn means that with the speed of light, which as you know is something like 300 kilometers per second, the latency between these 2 sites is so low that in comparison to the latency that a single switch adds, it's basically like less or negligible. It doesn't matter for you as a user that your storage is 10 kilometers away. And this allows us to actually have a reliable, available system because we have disaggregated the storage. And so then what we do, if a given leaf site would go down because there's a power outage or some kind of like line will be cut, we can simply restart your service, your server, literally, or your Kubernetes worker node on a different leaf site. Because the storage was centralized, no data is lost anyway. And we've actually done some testing. The average time to failover is about 3 minutes or so. And so even without adding the real Kubernetes features of having pods in different places so that the user would see no downtime at all, we can still guarantee like a very high SLA, because the chances that something goes down is very low still. And if it happens, your downtime is very limited. So this, I think, actually is a good time to stop. I feel I've been talking fast and a lot, and so maybe it will be a good time to ask some questions. Maybe Peter.
All right. Someone in the chat already asked, is this for heating or just warm tap water? And I know the answer, but I'll let you answer.
No, and that's a good question. So
yeah,
our goal is to use as much of the energy as possible. Essentially, if you look at the amount of, well, the other question is what we do in summer, right? So we could easily use the heating for heating the building, but then when summer comes around, you're not looking forward to use the heating. And so it's much more efficient for us to run the service year round. And there's actually plenty of locations where we can heat the tap water. And it's a lot of energy that goes in there. Like for an average apartment, about 10% or 15% of your energy bill actually goes to your shower, and not just for your heating. It's quite a significant amount. And so our second leaf site is an apartment building complex with over 150 apartments. And so there we can install like a huge capacity just for doing tap water, which then ultimately ends up in saving the most CO2 and has the biggest environmental benefit.
Right. And the follow-up question, have you calculated how many leaf servers you will need to heat an apartment building?
Yeah, but for an efficient apartment, only like 1 or 2. It depends a bit on like what kind of family lives in there and so forth. But you don't need a lot of servers per se. But so like 1 or 2 servers are like we have a module that's it's like 12 servers or so. And so with that we can power about 10 apartments or so.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. let's first get to the question from Daniel. Did someone investigate what percentage of users actually use GitOps? Because it feels like a lot of people are talking about it, but nobody's actually doing it. I have thoughts on this as well.
So this is a question on the reduce, which is of course very important. I don't have any numbers on this.
It's really growing in popularity, is what I'm seeing. So
what I'm also seeing is that customers of ours are actually doing this. At least some, like starting Kubernetes clusters by scripts. And it's also a really good strategy for preventing vendor locking.
All right. I'll consider it answered. Rio also had a question about which processor you use. And I remember, the processors we used were specifically overpowered or like almost selected to generate a lot of heat. But what about ARM? Because are you going to do ARM? I know that they're supposedly more power efficient. So.
I'm not at all against ARM. I think ARM is it's a very interesting platform. We're for sure looking into AMD processors that have a lot of more cores, which are then also more energy efficient. We are, as I mentioned, actually looking into using GPUs, NVIDIA 8100, and offer those. ARM is not exactly on the roadmap yet, but I think it's very interesting, and I feel that in the next couple of years you're going to see a big uptick in the usage of it. The question that this, of course, also raises is like, okay, well, but like if we use ARM, everything is going to be much more efficient, so then we don't really need to do this energy saving, right? But then I'll give you one piece of information that you might be wrong. Like depending on which numbers you take, some forecasts have been that the energy consumption worldwide is going to increase from something like 3% up to like 15% of all electricity consumed spent for data center. Especially with all the rise of machine learning and big data and the increase of the stuff that we're doing, the speed of increase of our usage is so big that we need all the savings that we can. And even then, we're going to be like stable at best, whereas for the environment, we need to reduce. So yes, please also use ARM. Yeah.
All right. And also, there's more questions from Rio. What kind of workload would you prefer from your point of view as a Leaf Cloud? Sustained load or bursts?
Well, I think that's a really good question.
Yeah.
And also like a good one that I can lead that also into my next slide that I had here. The kind of use cases or workloads for us for now is like, well, it doesn't really matter, but sustained workloads are easier for us to scale with, right? So like, since we know that we can deliver the heat year round, it helps us in capacity planning if we can see like a gradual uptick of capacity. If we see very spiked workloads, we will need to over-provision quite a bit more on our infrastructure in order to support high peaks. And so in particular, if you have particular workloads in mind in which you know, okay, I'm going to have a high base load for a long time, we can also give very interesting discounts. But also to explore this question a bit further, the use case that we have in mind are Kubernetes and cloud native workloads. And I didn't put this on top because I was speaking here. This is always on top of my slide. And I really believe that this is very logical to do because any kind of temporary failure can be picked up and solved with Kubernetes, and it's really obvious. Machine learning and HPC. this one has actually been climbing to the top of my slides, because more and more we're talking to customers who are really doing a lot of GPU kind of workloads, machine learning, and we see that this is something that has a high growth potential. Big data analytics, like of course Hadoop and other kind of like workloads. These are also kind of asynchronous. They produce a lot of heat, like batchy workloads. CI/CD we think is really good, like so test, build, and deploy, like really your GitOps itself. Build your Docker container, like build your software, test it, run it. All these kind of things are perfectly fit. Web application hosting, image and movie transcoding. I think what's interesting to mention also is that we came from a place where we assumed that our Leaf sites would be a little bit less reliable than a data center location. But more and more that we're working on it, we see that we can actually offer like a really high SLA even on these Leaf sites. And sure, it will be still lower than in a data center, but with the modern thinking that we have all done, since Facebook, where it's not a matter of question whether a piece of hardware will fail, but when. If this is your mindset, then it doesn't really matter if it fails, like once a year or once a month. And then we really go to it.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. And lastly, I think this is a question from Flor herself, actually. What can you do in your private life to reduce, reuse, and recycle? What can we all do in our households?
In our households? Well, I think one of the things actually, since I'm talking a lot about servers and so forth, and like reusing, I hear a lot of people who are like, I'm running like a server in my home. It's for my family. I download movies and so forth. Well, look at this one. Like, do you really need a tower machine, like this big thing with like 2 fat GPUs in there to download your movies? Or maybe can you replace that by like a Raspberry Pi or something like that? This can already make a big impact for what you do at home. If I'm still staying on the computing kind of topic. Flor said, I'm not the one who judges on that.
All right. Yeah, and that's of course on the compute side. But any other tips? I personally, I did mention having worked at the same company, and after the mix-up, I have been struggling to find something useful, and at some point I just started cleaning up plastic from the streets, or more specifically from the canals.
Yeah.
But any other things? The obvious one is stopping or reduce your meat consumption.
Yeah. No,
I know that's really hard.
Like ride your bicycle. Like we know all of these things, right? So like and talk about it to others. Like ask them to to come through with it. I think this is also an important one. Talk about it.
Right.
I see we're almost at the end. I would like to close with 2 closing comments, if you don't mind.
Go.
One is that, well, not this one yet. For those of you who are actually interested in looking at Leaf Cloud, we have just released our site. We are available on leaf.cloud, and we're offering people a €100 free credit, useful for 2 months, to go and try it. I would love for you to go give it a try. We really encourage also getting feedback from you. I'm available on the community Slack, and I'm also available on our own Leaf Cloud Slack for a direct kind of communication. So I'd love to have you go give it a try. Please reach out to me. My name should be easy to Google, and my phone number should be there as well. So please reach out to me if you have any need. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for speaking. Yeah, it sounds very lonely right now, right?
Yeah, it's always like
but I'm sure people at home are clapping as well.
Yeah.
All right. We will be having a very short break. And then we will move on to the next panel session. Thank you so much, and stay on. And stay on, we'll be back in a minute.
Hi, and welcome back. I hope you can hear me and definitely can see me. So we want to continue, and for the last 10-second panel of the night, and I guess Flor is going to introduce me to, yes, Sarah. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah. Hey everybody, I'm Sarah Khalife. I dressed the part, I guess, today with everybody wearing their onesie, so I wanted to join. I am a solutions engineer at GitHub, and I was working at GE before I joined GitHub, and that's where I actually got exposed to Kubernetes and what is Kubernetes and how it can be used for an enterprise use case. And then I joined GitHub about a year ago now, and have been lucky enough with GitHub's help and some of my old coworkers to have a session, to host a session at KubeCon, and it was my first my first conference session that I've ever had. So that was pretty great. So I'll be talking a little bit about my experience as a Kubernetes KubeCon speaker, and I'll pass it on to Karen.
Thank you. And Karen now? Hi.
Hey, so I'm Karen. I am a community PM at Microsoft Azure on the container compute team. And my team focuses on upstream and open source work. And I actually joined Microsoft via an acquisition that I guess at this point has been over 3 years ago. I started with a company called Deus, and we built open source tools on top of Kubernetes. So I have been attending, or at least participating at KubeCons since the first one. So I remember being at the first one in San Francisco back in, I think it was 2015. So it's been a while, and I've kind of seen it like grow to this crazy community, and that's been really exciting. And now, we're all trying to transition into the virtual format. So yeah, lots of changes, and I'm excited to be here today.
Thank you for joining. Peter, do you need to introduce yourself again, or?
Do I have to? No, I can say something. I'm Peter. I work as a consultant. You wouldn't say, but I also work as a consultant for full stack, and I'll help our clients implement Kubernetes, mostly on-prem.
Good old VMware. So the scope of the panel was really to discuss this edition of KubeCon, what we got out of it. I have to say, I was so bummed. So for once, finally, KubeCon was coming to Amsterdam, and we were all so excited. We were so counting on it. And the parties I would bring you to will be amazing, and everything, of course, like went into limbo. I'm not even sure the Cloud Native Foundation will consider Amsterdam again ever for another KubeCon. But anyway, it was good to virtually see people, even if it's not the same experience. So if you have spoken at KubeCon, so Sala, for example, what was your experience? Was it the first time, or?
Yeah, it was my first time doing any type of speaker talk ever, actually. So it was really exciting. I was super, super, super excited to fly to Amsterdam and give this talk. I was more than ecstatic that I got accepted into KubeCon as a speaker. And for our talk, I actually submitted 2 talks. One of them didn't get accepted, but the other one did. So it worked out great. And I was super bummed when things changed. I had everything planned and booked, and travel plans afterwards as well to experience Amsterdam, to experience the nearby areas as well. So definitely a different experience going virtual. I would say there were definitely much easier parts around it. At first, I wasn't excited to have the sessions virtual and pre-recorded, and it felt like it wasn't a real conference at first. But then as we participated during the actual KubeCon conference, even though part of the session was pre-recorded, the Q&A section felt a little more alive, and it felt that I felt that, thank God I pre-recorded, because it was way less stressful. And I didn't have to worry about it the day of, so I can actually sit there and experience the talk myself, which was very, it's kind of like meta. But at the end of the day, I think it was, for a virtual event, I think it was done really well. As you enter the platform, you feel like you're actually entering a conference, because it's just as confusing as when you go to a conference. But it was also a little less stressful, no jet lag. So it made our life a little easier in that sense. But definitely, as many people said in the previous panel as well, I definitely missed the in-person aspect. And I was really excited to meet more people, explore the different booths in person. It's just like an in-person conference is, I would say, a little different. But at the end of the day, it made it so much more accessible for everybody to join. So a lot more people than I expected joined the session, and I got a lot of questions. So I thought that was very, different, because you don't always have time to ask questions at a conference talk, because it's not, a recorded session.
In particular, I mean, KubeCon always been friendly to first-time speakers, and I guess a lot of people started speaking at KubeCon. We really the selection process also favors first-time speakers. But there's a few things they're actually better on virtual. You don't have to wake up at 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
That happens during the conference, and you don't have to carry around immense full of swags. And other than that, it's always better in person. But yeah, it was good. It was wise of CNCF to shift the time, so the keynotes in the afternoon. So it was actually more inclusive than the KubeCon in a way, because people could just join and be part of the conversation without expensive plane tickets and hotel rooms. So there is not always, there's something good that comes out of this, right? So Karen, from a sponsor perspective, was it very different? Was it engaging as always?
It was definitely different, right? Because like obviously you don't have this physical space that like you get to build, and like people get to walk by, and if they're interested, they can just kind of come in and ask questions. Sorry, I wanted to kind of go back to one of the things that Sarah had mentioned earlier about like pre-recording, right? I think like pre-recording actually helped, and I don't know if there are a lot of people in a position of like speaking and then also having to deal with the sponsor stuff, because I think normally during a conference, like I think a lot of speakers don't start prepping until the last minute, and I'm one of those people. And so normally it's like, you know, like the lead up to KubeCon, like the week before, it's like super busy, right? And it's like if you're on engineering, you're probably getting features out and things like that. So I think actually having people pre-record stuff kind of like balance out the timeline for them, just so that like, you know, everything's not like coming at them last minute. But back to the sponsor thing, yeah, it was definitely interesting to see how different sponsors were dealing with the difference, right? And it's just like, I think there were different approaches to doing swag and raffles and whatnot. I'm curious to see how CNCF will adjust it in the future. And if there's anyone here that didn't get to participate this time around, I'll just do like a quick explanation of what the sponsor experience was. So once you got to the conference site, there was like a visual UI of essentially a conference hall with different logos representing the different booths that people could go and visit. And then once you're there, you'll be like, you're able to, they have videos that play. There are different links that you can click through that the sponsors have set up for you to utilize as resources, or you can chat with staff members who are staffing the booth essentially. And yeah, I think the one of the new things that they did do this time around was utilize Slack a lot more. So that was something that happened across the board. But for sponsors, there were specific sponsor channels which had people there kind of just answering. And I think that was a good, hybrid experience, because like it wasn't necessarily, I feel like normally when you go to a booth, it's kind of like, hey, like, you're kind of bombarded with like sales, conversations like that, right? But then with it being on Slack, I think there was more of a community feel of like, hey, like I asked this question, right? And then it's like people would respond to it, but at the same time, like I think in a sense, because it was kind of this very like public forum, it was very like self-regulated in a sense, and just I would say like just more community oriented, because that culture is already kind of set by it being on Slack. Yeah,
it's so anything you want to add, Peter, maybe?
Well, I didn't participate in the Slack stuff, but I've been hearing some stories that we should actually move off of Slack for community stuff, because you cannot block people, so it can be unsafe for. It's hard to regulate that. I know that I've been spammed on the Kubernetes Slack and have been harassed for some reason. And of course, there's community members who handle it, but I mean, it would be really nice to have a block button for these community stuff, because they do always find their way in.
Sorry to hear that. I mean, clearly it's against the
yeah, of course,
but it's hard to enforce code of conduct in private conversations. It's
absolutely, but
time I hear that. I mean, for me, it was always it was a good experience. But indeed, there's this communication overload. Should I be on Slack? Should I be on the platform? And I heard people. Me personally, also, I struggle following everything I wanted to follow, but At least when you are in person, you can go only to one session. So you have to make a choice eventually. So almost yeah.
I would say that's an interesting experience because I knew of the Slack, but I didn't think questions will be asked on the Slack during the live Q&A. But people were asking questions on the Slack and on the platform. So that was, I would say, from a learning experience, that's something I would have to like pay attention to next time. But it wasn't until after the Q&A session ended that we saw some of the questions on Slack. And then we realized, oh, just ask us on Slack later on. So a lot of the questions that weren't answered, then they can message us. So we did have a lot of one-on-ones. There were some Slack channels that we were using as well. And I would say that was a positive because it did help me group my answers in a way that I can share that information with all the people that are asking similar questions. And then it could have been overwhelming. I did get questions even throughout the next day because the sessions were pre-recorded. So I thought that was also interesting. I don't think that's something I would normally get at a conference. So in-person conference. So I thought the Slack usage, I thought was pretty good for a conference. I never even thought of using that for a conference, right? So I thought at the end of the day, you can ask those questions even after the sessions end. And with the sessions already pre-recorded and you can go back and rewatch them, it gives you so much more, I would say, flexibility on if you do have, packed schedule, you have a family, you're working from home, you have to do actual work. So you can actually watch the sessions and ask your questions later on.
Yeah, I think there's this magic moment, right? Where everybody, I think, experienced that when the talk is finished and you walk to the speaker and there's this bunch of people around the speaker. It's the best part, right? So, but it's hard to repeat and to recreate because it's really like a little forum and something always happens there. Maybe you join a project or you get answer to a question that really bugs you for a long time. So this is the core. The session itself is more an excuse to start a conversation about a topic, and then what really matters is what people say to each other, and that's the whole point of CNCF, or getting people together working on the same on a project. Great. Anything you want to discuss? I don't have a list of questions, and I'm looking at the chat, but it's not much in there.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up something that Peter mentioned about just like kind of getting unwanted messages on Slack. So I don't know if everyone knows this. There is the CNCF staff members are trained to handle kind of code of conduct violations. So when things like that happen, and they do, I would encourage you all to reach out to the staff members, just in a sense, kind of like for your own best interest, but also for them to kind of know what's going on, right? Like this moving to a virtual platform is like very different for all of us, and I think they're still trying to figure out like how to best handle these things, right? So, giving them feedback and kind of letting them know how things are going and what potential problems that there might be is a good way to provide, input and just like let them know how to better improve on future conferences. But yeah, just know that like there are people who are there for this, right? And by design, they're kind of there, like they're meant to be behind the scenes, but yeah, you're not alone. Just keep that in mind. And so like that's kind of specific to the events. And then in general, like for Kubernetes, for the Kubernetes community, there is also a separate code of conduct committee as well. And I'm actually on that. So that's kind of why it's always on the back of my mind. Just, know that there are resources to help deal with, inappropriate behavior or just like, so that's all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There is and they were very helpful and very quick, but Slack does miss the functionality of having a block button. Right? You did a session on how to survive KubeCon.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because
so originally, my co-speaker Michelle Norley and I submitted a talk. it was a like KubeCon and Cloud Native Con 101 talk. And originally when we like wrote the proposal and everything, it was meant for a physical conference. So we definitely had to adjust some of our advice. And even then, like there were some things we didn't know the details of because they were being implemented towards the end, right? I think the general things that are in our talk, if anyone wants to look it up, are like still pretty useful. I imagine like it would still be useful for the next conference coming up in November, because I think when you're new. So the way that we had tried to approach the session was like, it's as if you don't know anything about this community, right? Like I think I've been here for a while, but we really tried to like make it very, very beginner friendly. I think those elements were still there, but I think it was more of just like the main big changes were just things around like like navigating the platform, right? And just and a lot of that was like new to everyone because we like had never used that platform. But I think overall like our general tips and tricks were just around like making sure you ask questions, and I think that kind of applies to everyone. And we had introduced like what CNCF is, and I think one of the main things that I try to push was like making sure that like I don't know if people are able to do this, but like this probably was the ideal thing to do, was to just kind of like block off all the other things that you needed to do, just because like there's so much going on, right? It's like you can be watching a conference and then also be like like shopping online or whatever, right? Because the internet is at your disposal.
You muted yourself, Karen.
Oh, my bad. Sorry. So I don't know where I got muted, but one of the main recommendations we made was just to make sure that like you kind of focused on the conference, like closed all your other windows, and then just like watch stuff, giving it your full attention. And then if you also had to work during the day, though, to just basically schedule times when you would have to go back to your work. But I mean, given everything was online and recorded, I think that actually helped this time around, where people can go back to stuff and not feel like, they missed that one session they really wanted to catch because it was all recorded. Yeah, but overall, I think, there are trade-offs, right? Like it was all virtual, so the newcomer experience was different, but at the same time, because it was virtual, we got way more newcomers than we ever do. Like the majority of people, I think, were like first-time attendees. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I think for them, it probably worked in their favor.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's a great experience. The goal is to be as inclusive as we can be, right? So, and this is pose new challenges. There's new people at the door, and we don't know how to give them a good experience of the platform, of the communities, of the foundation. So it's always a learning experience. Now, I wonder the next one is going to be. Did you, Sal, did you submit also for next one?
So actually, because of the KubeCon talk, I was working at GitHub. It's all about open source community, building out that community outside of just the work I'm doing every day. Most of my customers are enterprise customers, so a lot of the focus I have on my day-to-day is specific to the customer. But the real, I would say, differentiator is like when you bring in the community, when you talk about open source, when you talk about especially a project like Kubernetes, where I would say it's like the most prime example of open source thriving. So anyway, the Kubernetes talk that I gave with we talking about a little bit about GitHub Actions. I gave it with Grant Griffiths. He works on a SIG on the CSI SIG, so it's a container storage interface SIG. So I was able to learn about what SIGs are, learn more about the Kubernetes community from that aspect as well. So combining the two conversations from the Actions and GitHub side of things and how we can do automation, how we can talk about the open source community, and then actually have somebody who is actively contributing to the SIG to the SIGs and be able to speak to it from that aspect, that opened up the opportunity to do more talks in general. So we have a Twitch. So somebody was mentioning Twitch is a new platform for a lot of things, especially when being virtual. So GitHub does demo days every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, or UTC minus 10, I think, to somebody else's comments earlier in the day as well. With that, those demo days are focused on a lot more than just GitHub itself. It's supposed to be a lot more how you can leverage some of the tools and existing platforms to use it for open source, to use it for any of the other tooling. So we're actually taking that KubeCon talk that we did, and we are redoing it in a sense at the GitHub demo day on October 16th, but focusing in on more specific, obviously to GitHub at that sense, but also taking it to the next level, answering some of those questions that were asked and suggestions that we received during the talk, and implementing those changes that we kind of took from the KubeCon conference. And then because of that, we have a couple more. I have a couple more sessions coming up. Literally, that sparked a lot more conversations. So this meetup was super exciting for that reason. And then because we have this meetup, we had a lot more Kubernetes talk. GitHub also has a container registry service that we are publicly announced, I would say, a couple weeks ago, but it's been very popular, and we have a couple sessions on that, and one of the sessions that will be hosted on that on October 22nd will be a session that I'll be hosting. So it honestly just opened up a lot more opportunities. I did not submit anything for KubeCon North America, because I didn't know if I will be able to do another talk with the amount of work that I have to do. But I would say, to Karen's point, one thing I didn't do very well during the last session or during the last conference is kind of disconnect from everything else. So I was kind of working while attending the conference, and I was trying to catch up on things and still maintain my active Slack channels on my GitHub Slack, and then try to participate in the CNCF one. It was just too much going on. So I would say if I have the opportunity to participate, which I signed up for to participate, but not to speak at, if I can, I will completely disconnect and just try to focus on the conference only.
Absolutely. I think that's such a good tip. It's so tempting to, continue working and, be productive. But you're really not, right? Because you're doing both with half or less than half of your attention. So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I for sure, I cannot multitask.
I thought I was doing good. I was doing it really well until I actually had to, answer questions on like different Slack channels and be fully involved in it. And, I was able to be fully involved during that couple hours that I was presenting, but it was tough to maintain that throughout the 3 days. It was the first conference I would say that I participated that was virtual over a couple of days. We had and it was very different than the one I only had 2 so far virtual conferences, surprisingly. The one I participated before was GitHub Universe or GitHub Satellite, and that was also phenomenal, but it was only done in 1 day. So you can join earlier in the day, you can join later in the day, and you can still participate, but it was all done in 1 day. So then we hit all time zones and not have to worry about maintaining that energy and excitement for 3 days straight virtually. So I thought that was also a good way of doing it.
Indeed, but there is I feel a bit of online events fatigue. So people are creating so much content that is really hard to follow. I think a lot of content is now being recorded that wasn't recorded before. I noticed we organized the meetup, and we thought about recording the session. We never really thought about it. It's nothing special. And now everything is recorded. Everything must be online and for you to consume. And it's honestly slightly too much for me. But so there is, in a way, also that's why when the whole world was started to go online, we thought with the other organizers, shall we do also online meetups? And at some point I thought, it's too much. I mean, we would just be one in many events. So let's let the professional do this, and let's focus on local community. So it makes sense for us to just do in-person meetup when we can, and when we can do it again, and not add ourselves to the very long list of online events. This is an exception because we wanted to bring international speakers and to recreate the feeling of KubeCon. But there's a question from Thatcher asking how can we help creating more interaction in this event? So join an open room, or if we can, how can we help? So for example, just one note, actually Microsoft has this role of moderator or arbiter of the chat, and I did it for build. So you just sit in there and make sure that the questions they are asked and they are pertinent, and they agree to the code of conduct. I think there was also for KubeCon, but I never seen any bad question or violation in KubeCon. But yeah, so what do you think we can do to help achieve more interaction? And it's an open. Peter just left, but.
So I'm a community manager for Helm, and so as a CNCF project, we participated in the project pavilion, and as part of that, we also had 2 sessions of basically office hours with the maintainers, and that was probably one of the things at the conference that I felt like worked well with regards to fostering like real-time interaction, because I think like, I don't know. I mean, like typing your conversations is just a very different interaction, right? Than as opposed to like talking to people. And so having just like this Zoom room where we, had people kind of come in and out, where they could passively listen if they wanted to, or they could ask questions. I thought that worked well, just because like you could actually see who the people you're talking to, right? Who you'll maybe eventually see, and kind of to help facilitate that, so it wasn't just an empty room. We had one of our other maintainers, Bridget, kind of just help, like bring up questions for things that someone like might not be able to, or like might not think to ask right now or whatnot, or things that like we as on the maintainer side wanted to get out, just to push the conversation going forward. But I felt like that was helpful, at least in terms of like getting faces to names, and then also just like, like it was a specific enough topic that you didn't just get a bunch of like random people in there kind of screaming into the void. So I thought the like office hours concept, at least for the projects, worked really well. Yeah. So I hope they do that more in the future. And I think that they're going to try and adopt that more, at least for the CNCF projects.
We need a new name though, because they are not in the office. So we just need anybody wants to add something? My personal experience. So I did one thing at KubeCon as an active participant. It was the mentoring session. So CNCF does it every KubeCon. It's almost like a speed date event thing. Like we used to do it in a room, and either the mentor stays in the same place and the mentee go around, or the other way around. And this time it was virtual, and it's pretty okay. So there were actually virtual tables where mentors would move around every 5 minutes or something, and people could just ask questions about how to start a career in open source, how to start contributing to the project, and that was pretty okay. I mean, I met people from Africa to Singapore to US, so that's it doesn't happen that often. So even if it's virtual, it was an occasion to be impactful on somebody's life, because it's the whole community here is built on mentoring, right? So when you first submit a patch, when you first open an issue, there's always somebody senior or somebody with a little more experience helping you, guiding you. So either you are either side of the table you are, either you're a mentee or a mentor, it's co-creating content and co-creating the community. So that's pretty good. Anybody wants to share something? You're all muted. So.
Yeah. Yeah. What should be done better at the next KubeCon?
That's a tough one.
From whose
I think it was done really well. From a personal perspective, yeah.
Sorry. I personally felt like there were so many things going on, and because normally, like, you know, like you all mentioned, right, it's like when you go in person, like you're physically there and like you can't really be pulled into other things, but I think this time around, because it was all virtual, it was very overwhelming. There were so many options. I kind of hope that they will not break things down more often, but I think like so this is like kind of going back to Helm. This is one of the things I'm trying to push for. Right? Like I felt like there were so many things going on. I actually wonder if the projects should have more of like their own days focused on their own projects. I think like things like EnvoyCon makes sense, right? Where it's like kind of pulled out of the main event. And normally like KubeCon, it's KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con, right? Like it's not supposed to be just Kubernetes, but I think it's becoming really, really overwhelming. So I think it'd be interesting to see more specific events take place. Just because, yeah, there's a lot of options all within 3 days. And it's hard to like be focused and to get a focused audience as well. So I'm curious to see how that plays out and if that model will work better, because you'll at least kind of have a captured audience. Yeah.
So Flor just introduced in the chat the idea of a conference buddy. It should be great, like people that you can rely to, can like can guide you in your experience. For me, it's so these events. They are coming from a moment. They are tied to this big machine that has to move every 3 times a year, right? So, but now this is virtual. Maybe we can have a mini KubeCon every month, right? So there's no need anymore to invest the money to book a big venue and do these huge events. So now that we are going virtual, maybe we can do it more often, maybe shorter, and just get more in so be part of a community will become more of a daily routine or a monthly routine or a weekly routine, something like that. But it's just my idea, of course. I'll propose it to the people, to the leadership team, but they're probably very busy already.
Yeah, I would say the thing to do remotely that is kind of tough is just create a culture. So it's beyond just feeling inclusive, beyond just having that communication, but creating that culture. And I know, Peter, you mentioned that you onboard members remotely for your team. And I think that can be taken, that learning can be taken back to a conference as well. How do you improve or how do you generate a culture when you're doing everything so remote? Because I know for at least onboarding in general, people fly in most of the time. If they're not nearby, they can go out to dinners, meet the team in person at least once, and a conference allows you to do that as well. If you don't get to see some of your coworkers, but everybody's working on Kubernetes, they're most likely going to be at KubeCon. You get to see your team member, your old friends and old coworkers and team members again, to have that, culture built out within your team where you can go hang out, go see each other, go talk about the latest trends, go talk about what your favorite talk is. So how do you implement that culture remotely? I don't know if you have any ways of doing that or if you've thought through that.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Sorry to throw the...
Yeah, no, but I can tell you what I did with my new colleagues. So I joined this team where they had to set up Kubernetes, and the two people in my team were, well, they had a little bit of experience, but they just couldn't figure it out. And what we basically did for 1.5 months is have a Microsoft Teams call open for the entire day, non-stop. And you really spend a lot of time with each other. And of course, you need to make room for silly stuff in between as well, and maybe a little bit of chit chat. And that actually went surprisingly well. This was the first time I remotely joined the company, and that went really well. Eventually, though, we did break down, and I had 1 day a week co-working space with one of the team members. And yeah, it is hard to substitute the in life or in real life experience of meeting people. But overall, I have to say it went much better than I expected.
That's great. Yeah, I think I did something similar. We have a Zoom link that is active at all times called Water Cooler. So people can jump into that water cooler chat and talk about whatever, what ice cream what's your favorite ice cream flavor? It doesn't matter. Unless you like pistachio, then nobody likes pistachio ice cream. But at the end of the day, it was great. At the beginning, a lot of people loved that idea and people participated. But as you said, it kind of takes effort, I would say, to improve that and to continue participating in that. So yeah, I think that's why it's an interesting challenge, both from a conference perspective and from a team perspective, or just a co-working perspective. What are some of the best ways? And I'll open up to the audience as well if you have comments. What are some of the best ways that you felt that culture was still implemented, even though you're remote from your coworkers, you're remote from your team?
Yeah, and similarly, so I work for a consultancy company, which means that all of my direct colleagues are all at different clients. And we started doing, casual join if you want to or not, Friday afternoon beers with the team. And I actually saw my colleagues more often than I did before, which is also a little bit strange, right? So there's some good things to come out of all of this, I think.
That's interesting, yeah.
So we approached the end of it. It was a long one, more than 2 hours. So just last question to wrap up, suggested by Flor. Flor is silently suggesting me things because at this time of the day, I really don't think much anymore. So what are we hoping to keep from the online event experience when we can meet again, right? So what's the whole drama of COVID will teach us, right? So I have a personal experience, something that I want to share. So we organized the Kubernetes Community Day Amsterdam last year. This year is not happening. We hope to meet again in April 2021. And this time we're going to do it hybrid. As in, I don't know how yet. We don't know how yet. We are brainstorming, trying to give online attendance the same experience of the in-person attendance. So we're not gonna nail it down the first time, but that's the idea, that either you are abroad, you are away, you are in there with your body and with your mind. We want to be inclusive in this way. So I think the best part of the experience of what we learn in doing this month is that we should be more inclusive. Also, people that cannot be there, people or don't want to be there, because they don't want to catch a virus. So let's try to make sure that everybody has the best experience we can give, and from the community. So, any other thoughts about this?
Similarly, the feedback I've been getting from other meetups as well is it's so great that this is online now, because now I can finally join, because maybe people have kids or other scheduling issues that prevent them from joining meetups normally. So that was a little bit of a wake-up call for me as well, because you normally always see the same faces at the meetups, and that's definitely different now.
Yeah, I would say I think a lot more people are getting comfortable virtually than they were before, even if they weren't in tech. In general, almost everybody knows the word virtual and knows how to join at least a Teams link, a Zoom link, StreamYard. So I think having that hybrid model is going to be a huge win from both in-person conferences and for inclusivity. So you can have that hybrid experience. And I know before a lot of conferences did live stream just some of the keynotes, but maybe now there's a way to live stream and incorporate the virtual audience as well into this conversation. So if there's, if things are being live streamed, if there's questions coming in from the crowd and the audience, maybe those both can be answered. And I think we have more capabilities on doing that today.
I want to say, I think during this time, while there are a lot of virtual conferences, I would recommend people who are interested in speaking but haven't had the opportunity or aren't super comfortable with speaking in person to kind of utilize the opportunities to practice with virtual events. I don't like public speaking very much. And so, I with this task conference, it was like pre-recorded and everything. And I felt like that was a lot easier to deal with, and just, kind of good opportunities for introducing yourself to public speaking and doing trial runs for down the line. So
I love that idea. That's
yeah,
great.
That's a good point. It's also weird because I also like to see the reaction from the audience sometimes, especially if I haven't prepared well. So yeah, it's a knife that cuts on both ends. But I think it's great if conferences give speakers the option, right, of pre-recording, because there's no reason not to.
Something I missed because I co-speak with somebody, and online is way harder because it's the play between two people that makes the talk interesting. So maybe if Peter wants, we can prepare a talk together and then see how it goes.
Sure.
It was great to have.
I think I think we're ready to wrap up. But I want to give a shout out to our ops person.
The amazing Floor.
Reveal yourself.
Yes, there she is.
We said we're not going to do this.
You can make me. Anyway, thank you so much, Floor, for organizing everything and pushing us to finally organize a meetup again. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks.
And thanks, everyone, for attending.
This was great.
Thanks, awesome.
Bye.
Yeah. Well.
All right. Bye, everybody.